Investigative reporter Cheryl Mercedes is verifying questions you have about the virus. Cheryl?
Mia, the number of illnesses and the deaths affiliated with the coronavirus keep going up every day. Now, how contagious is it? Well, we still don't know. Some viruses, like the measles, are very contagious, while others are not. It is still unclear how easily COVID-19 spreads and how long it lives in people. Now, someone else wrote us, I noticed more U.S. military bases are opening as coronavirus quarantine camps. Well, is that being done because of a higher death rate? And that's being reported. Well, that is false. In fact, the U.S. government set up those centers across the country to slow down the introduction and the impact of the virus in the U.S. And the economic impact is another concern. Is it true that automobile factories are closing in China because of the coronavirus? Well, that is true. The virus is expected to have an impact on both supply and demand for vehicles as automakers like General Motors, Honda and Nissan suspend production. Tesla too. The good news is the shutdowns are temporary. Someone else called our KHOU Investigates tip line asking, is there coronavirus in casinos in Louisiana? Well, that is false. There have been no confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Louisiana. However, there was a norovirus outbreak 2 weeks ago at a casino in Lake Charles. Mia?
So